December 8th, 1986, Pepperell, Massachusetts, a quiet town tucked away in the cold folds of New England. It was the kind of place where families left their doors unlocked, where everyone knew each other's names, and where nothing truly terrible ever happened. Until that night. It was just past 6 o'clock in the evening when the phone rang at the local police department. The department was small, only about 10 officers serving the 10,000 residents spread between Pepperell and East Pepperell. Most calls were harmless: domestic disturbances, public intoxication, the occasional fight. Nothing that made your skin crawl, but the voice on the other end of the line that night did. A neighbor was screaming, saying a girl had just broken into their home through a window. She was crying, panicking. She said her family was being held hostage next door. Police immediately responded to 93 Lawrence Street, and when they arrived, they met 14-year-old Tina Bowen. Her hands were shaking, her eyes wide. She had climbed out of a second-story window to escape, but her father, Frank, her sister, Karen, and their friend, Kathleen, were still inside. Tina's words spilled out in pieces, half choked through tears. They'd gotten home around 5:30. The moment they stepped inside, they knew something wasn't right. Radios were blasting from every corner of the house. The televisions were all on, screaming static and nonsense. Every single light was turned on. The house felt violated, like someone or something had been inside. Frank Bowen walked from room to room, his gut twisting. Things were out of place, disheveled. Someone had used the bathroom in the basement. He moved carefully, quietly, but when he opened the front closet, he saw him, a man, or something like a man, standing still inside the darkness. In one hand, he held a hatchet, in the other, a steel wrench. His face was painted in grotesque patterns. His hair was spiked straight up, like thorns. He wore a furry coat and stared with wide, emotionless eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He simply told Frank to gather the girls and go into one of the bedrooms. Frank did as he was told, shielding the children with his body, walking them slowly backward into the hallway. But the moment they were inside the bedroom, Frank slammed the door shut and wedged it shut with whatever he could find. Inside that room, the girls were panicking, screaming, crying. Tina's fear was so overwhelming, she made a split-second decision that would change everything. She opened the window and jumped. And that escape is what brought police to their doorstep. It's what saved them. Tina gave officers 2 phone numbers for the house. They tried both. No answer. Just the haunting echo of ringing through a home where something unnatural was waiting. Officers surrounded the house, weapons drawn. Every second stretched longer than the one before, and then movement. A flicker of shadows at the second-story window. Frank Bowen appeared, shouting to the police. He said the man was gone, or hiding. He couldn't be sure. Frank lowered the girls out of the window to the officers waiting below. Then he jumped himself. The family reunited in the neighbor's house, shaken but alive. But inside 93 Lawrence Street, police were about to find something even more disturbing than they expected. They searched the house, room by room, carefully, silently. But the intruder was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished. Outside, they found the sliding door to the back deck slightly open. Nearby, lying in the grass, were the hatchet and wrench, tools of terror, abandoned. There were no footprints, no signs of escape, no noise, no hint of where he had gone. They brought in tracking dogs, nothing. One dog couldn't even pick up a scent. It was as if the man had never existed, or worse, as if he had dissolved into the very walls. Frank told police the hatchet was his. He usually kept it on his nightstand. Somehow the man had taken it, used what was familiar to them, to terrify them. The family gave vague descriptions. He might have been 17 or 25, blonde or brunette, with a mustache, or maybe not. The paint and spikes made it impossible to tell. He was a ghost in disguise. Frank had a feeling, one that chilled him more than anything else, that this wasn't the man's first time in their house. that he had been there before, that he had watched them, learned them, studied them, and he was right, because the nightmare was far from over. The man who hid in their walls, who waited in their closet, who whispered chaos into their lives, was Daniel LaPlante. And just weeks later, he would strike again, not with a wrench, not with a hatchet, but with murder. The Bowen family escaped with their lives, but the evil that visited their home wasn't done yet. The man who terrorized them, the one who painted his face and waited quietly inside their walls, was Daniel LaPlante. And what no one knew then, what they couldn't have imagined, was just how deeply disturbed he truly was. Daniel wasn't a stranger to violence. He wasn't even a stranger to the Bowens. Long before the hostage incident, Daniel had already begun his descent into madness. But unlike most monsters, his mask wasn't just face paint. It was a life of secrets, trauma, and obsession. He was only 16. His childhood had been filled with abuse, emotional and physical. He'd been sexually assaulted by adults he should have been able to trust. And as he got older, the pain twisted into something darker. He began breaking into homes, not to steal, but to watch, to listen, to be near people without them knowing. He would move things around, leave doors open, take nothing. Just enough to make them feel unsafe, paranoid, haunted. He liked it. In one house, he even lived inside the walls, hiding, crawling through crawl spaces, listening. That house was the Bowens. Weeks before the night of the hostage crisis, Daniel had broken in, not once, not twice, multiple times. He stayed hidden in their attic, coming out when the family was gone. He ate their food, read their mail, learned their patterns, and all the while they had no idea, until that night, until he finally decided to reveal himself. After the hostage incident, Daniel vanished. Authorities had no idea where he went. No leads, no trail. It was as if he melted back into the shadows, but the darkness inside him only grew hungrier. Less than a year later, on November 16th, 1987, Daniel would commit an act so brutal, so heartless, it would scar the town forever. Priscilla Gustafson was a 33-year-old nursery school teacher. She lived just a few miles away in the nearby town of Townsend. She was kind, gentle, a loving wife and mother of 2 young children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William. That afternoon, Priscilla didn't show up for work. Her husband Andrew began to worry. He called home. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. He left work early and rushed home, his heart pounding, a sinking weight building in his stomach. When he opened the front door, his worst fears became a waking nightmare. Priscilla was lying face down on the bed in the master bedroom. Her hair was soaked with blood. She had been shot in the head at point-blank range with a .22 caliber pistol. But that wasn't all. She'd been raped. Down the hall, Abigail and William were found in separate bathtubs, drowned, their tiny bodies lifeless, left behind as if they were nothing. It wasn't a robbery. Nothing had been stolen. This was rage. This was personal. This was a performance of cruelty. And as investigators combed the scene, a name started to float to the surface. Daniel LaPlante, the boy who had once lived like a ghost inside the walls. He'd been in trouble before, petty theft, breaking and entering. But this was different. A search of Daniel's home uncovered the murder weapon. Along with it, belongings from the Gustafsons in blood. He was arrested after a manhunt, hiding in a nearby dumpster. At just 17, Daniel LaPlante was charged with 3 counts of murder. During the trial, his face remained cold, blank, no remorse, no apology, just silence. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 3 life sentences to be served consecutively. But justice doesn't bring peace. Not for the Bowen family, not for the Gustafsons, not for a town that had to learn that evil doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it's already inside your home, waiting, watching, listening. Daniel LaPlante's crimes were shocking, not just for their brutality, but for the way he slithered into the lives of his victims. Slowly, quietly, like a disease spreading in the dark. He didn't just kill, he haunted. And long after his arrest, his presence still lingers in the nightmares of a town that we'll never forget. Because some stories don't end when the door's locked. Some monsters don't hide under the bed. They hide in the walls. And sometimes, they come out. Daniel LaPlante was locked away in a maximum security prison, but that didn't end his story. In fact, his name would continue to haunt the Bowens, the Gustafsons, and everyone who lived in that quiet town. While in prison, LaPlante was studied by psychologists and criminologists who were horrified by his cold, calculated nature. His ability to compartmentalize his emotions, to carry out unspeakable acts without remorse, he was a textbook example of a psychopath. But what made him even more unsettling was the sheer lack of an obvious motive. He wasn't driven by money or revenge. He didn't target victims because they had wronged him. He did it for the thrill, for the power, for the fear. In 2014, nearly 3 decades after his arrest, LaPlante's name resurfaced. Despite being convicted of 3 brutal murders, he was granted a chance at parole. He had served only 27 years of his sentence, a fraction of the time he should have spent in prison. The parole board argued that LaPlante had shown some signs of remorse and was a changed man. But the survivors, especially the Bowen family, would never forget the terror he brought into their lives. Public outrage exploded. People could never forget the monster who had terrorized their homes, who had lived among them like a ghost, silently watching, waiting. The idea that he could be released into society again, to stalk and terrorize anyone else, was a nightmare that no one was ready to wake up from. As of now, Daniel LaPlante remains in prison, still fighting for his freedom. But the scars of his crimes will never fade. The Bowens, the Gustafsons, and the town of Pepperell will carry this dark chapter with them forever, knowing that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones who roar. They're the ones who blend into the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Some monsters are never truly caught. Some monsters live on, even after they've been locked away. This concludes the chilling tale of Daniel LaPlante. His legacy is one of fear, manipulation, and a reminder that evil doesn't always come in the form of a beast. It can wear the face of someone who looks just like you. But when the walls close in, and the truth comes crawling out of the darkness, there is no hiding from it. Thank you for tuning in to Beware Decodes. If you found this story haunting, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more true crime, unsolved mysteries, and horror stories. Don't miss what comes next. Stay safe and keep your doors locked.